Earlier this April, the European Parliament passed a landmark legislation to tackle the issue. It requires companies to ensure products sold in the European Union have not led to deforestation and forest degradation. The law has triggered widespread ramifications for countries outside the EU, and in particular Australia, where land clearing has become a controversial issue over the years. Roger Maynard reports from the southwestern slopes of New South Wales.
Deforestation, deep in the heart of rural New South Wales and one of Australia's most productive agricultural regions. Farm manager Matt Cummins looks after more than 10,000 acres of land here, rearing livestock and growing crops. But to make this a profitable enterprise, the land also needs a helping hand. That's why so many additional native trees have been planted in recent years.
This project here in itself was developed in the early 90s to try and stabilise and lower the salinity table within the local profile.
Tree planting and the additional vegetation has helped to enrich the soil and steady the water supply passing underground. Quality land is essential for keeping his 1,000 head of cattle and 10,000 sheep well fed. And that's largely thanks to sound agricultural practices. But a few thousand kilometres further north in Queensland, it's a different picture. Deforestation has denuded much of the landscape and threatens native wildlife because of beef-driven land clearing.
The current amount of clearing that happens, say, in the state of Queensland is about 500,000 hectares a year, so 500,000 hectares a year, and that's impacting on dozens, if not hundreds, of endangered species habitat.
Now, a new law introduced by the European Union will target deforestation and ban the purchase of overseas beef and other agricultural products unless farmers can prove the meat comes from land that's not been cleared since 2020. And that's worrying some sections of the agricultural community and Australian lawmakers. For the government here in Canberra, this new EU law creates something of a dilemma. Australia is keen to sign a free trade deal with the European Union, and reservations about farm exports could seriously damage those negotiations. Such is the gap between Canberra and the European Union that the government has hinted it's prepared to walk away from the free trade talks. And that hardline stance has the backing of Australia's National Farmers Federation.
Our message to government has been, don't sign an agreement if it's to the detriment of Australian farmers. We want freer trade. We want more liberalised markets. We want more recognition of, the strengths and competitiveness of the Australian agriculture. But what we don't want is for Australian agriculture to be kneecapped by some free trade agreement that doesn't allow us to continue to export and continue to develop here as an industry.
This argument goes to the very heart of the current discussions. Farmers argue that Australia has different agricultural systems and practices because of its geography and climatic extremes. But environmental NGO The Wilderness Society says the new EU law could benefit Australian farmers, most of whom are opposed to deforestation.
I actually think this is a really positive thing for Australian farmers. If we can sort out this issue around land clearing, Australia will be at the front of the queue for selling produce and getting finance from Europe.
Back at Deforestation, the issue is less about politics and more about good animal husbandry and sound agricultural practices.
Every bit of your income is based upon how you look after your country. Look, we've got to stabilise our entire beings around it. Australian agricultural sector is strong, it's vibrant, it's backed by passionate people and passionate companies.
It is that fundamental optimism of people like Matt Cummins that keeps Australian farmers going in the face of frequent floods and drought. Now there's another challenge, with the vexed issue of deforestation having to be resolved if Australian agriculture is to gain a foothold in one of the world's richest markets. Roger Maynard, CNA, on the southwest slopes of New South Wales.